The gunshot split the heavy silence of the dusty Montana street, sending Vivian Nelson stumbling backward into the dirt outside Clearwater's general store. Her heart pounded as she crouched behind a water trough, clutching her small paper-wrapped package of sugar and coffee to her chest. Another bank robbery, the third this month in their small town of Silverdale. The year was 1878, and the West was still wild enough to make a widow like her question her decision to stay after her husband's passing. When the shooting stopped and the thunder of hoofbeats faded into the distance, Vivian straightened her simple blue calico dress and tucked a loose strand of auburn hair back into her severe bun. At 32, she was still young, but grief had etched fine lines around her eyes and mouth that made her appear older. "You all right there, Mrs. Nelson?" Sheriff Thompson called out, his revolver still drawn as he surveyed the damage. "I'm fine, thank you," she answered quietly, brushing the dust from her skirt. "Those Blackwell boys are getting bolder. You best be careful heading back to your place. It's mighty isolated out there." Vivian nodded. Her small homestead lay 3 miles outside of town, far enough to feel the weight of loneliness, but close enough that she could make the journey on foot when necessary. Today, she regretted not bringing her wagon. As she started the long walk home, the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. The small paper package grew heavy in her arms, and her thoughts grew heavier still. 2 years a widow, and the struggle only seemed to intensify. The farm was failing. The bank was threatening foreclosure, and despite her best efforts, she couldn't manage it all alone. Lost in thought, she barely noticed the approaching rider until the horse's shadow fell across her path. Startled, she looked up to see a tall man on a chestnut stallion. His broad shoulders were silhouetted against the sky, face partially hidden beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat politely, "looks like you could use a ride." Vivian hesitated. Her husband Daniel had taught her to be wary of strangers, particularly in these lawless times. But something in the man's voice, a gentle rumble tinged with what sounded like a Virginia accent, put her slightly at ease. "I don't accept rides from men I don't know," she said firmly. The stranger nodded respectfully. "Wade Xanders, madam, new ranch hand at the Triple Bar, just rode in last week." He extended a calloused hand down toward her. "And judging by that package and your walking direction, you must be the widow Nelson." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Word travels fast, small towns always do." His smile was surprisingly gentle for a man with such weathered features. "I give you my word as a gentleman, I mean no harm. It's a mighty hot day for walking." After another moment's hesitation, Vivian accepted his hand and allowed him to pull her up behind him on the horse. She settled awkwardly, uncertain where to place her hands. "You'll want to hold on, Mrs. Nelson," Wade said, amusement coloring his voice. "Sampson here has a bit of spirit." Reluctantly, she placed her hands lightly on his waist, immediately aware of the solid strength beneath his cotton shirt. It had been so long since she'd touched a man, the sensation was jarring. As they rode, Wade kept a respectful silence that Vivian found surprisingly comfortable. When they arrived at her small farmhouse, with its weathered porch and struggling vegetable garden, she felt an unexpected pang of embarrassment. The place had fallen into disrepair since Daniel's death. "Thank you, Mr. Xanders," she said stiffly as he helped her down. "Wade, please." His eyes, a striking blue that reminded her of summer skies, met hers briefly, and it was no trouble at all. She expected him to leave then, but instead he frowned at her porch steps where one had completely rotted through. "That's a dangerous step, Mrs. Nelson." "I'm aware," she said, a touch of defensiveness in her tone. Wade dismounted in one fluid motion. "I could fix that for you. Wouldn't take but a few minutes." "I don't need charity, Mr. Xanders. It's not charity when it's a neighbor helping a neighbor." He was already examining the step. "Besides, I'd hate to hear you broke your ankle because I rode away without lending a hand." Before she could protest further, he'd retrieved tools from his saddlebag and set to work. Vivian stood watching, conflicted between pride and practicality. Finally, practicality won out. "Would you care for some water?" she offered. "That would be most welcome." While Wade worked, Vivian brought him water and found herself studying him. He wasn't handsome in the traditional sense. His face was too weathered, his nose slightly crooked from what must have been a break, but there was something compelling about him. His movements were efficient, his hands capable. When he finished with the step, he refused her offer of payment. "Just being neighborly," he insisted. "Though I wouldn't say no to stopping by again to check on a few other repairs this place might need." Vivian stiffened. "I manage just fine on my own, Mr. Xanders." Something flickered in his eyes, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of her fierce independence. "I'm sure you do, Mrs. Nelson, but even the strongest of us sometimes need a helping hand." After he rode away, Vivian stood on her porch, watching until he disappeared down the dusty road. She told herself the sudden emptiness she felt was merely the usual loneliness settling back in after a brief interruption. Over the next few weeks, Wade Xanders appeared regularly at Vivian's farm, always with some excuse. He brought extra lumber he happened to have, or came by to return a tool he'd borrowed. Each time he would fix something: a leaking roof, a broken fence post, a stubborn well pump, and each time, Vivian's resistance weakened slightly. One afternoon in late summer, as Wade repaired her chicken coop, Vivian brought him a glass of lemonade and found herself lingering. "Why are you doing all this?" she finally asked. Wade took a long drink before answering. "Because it needs doing. There are plenty of things that need doing all over Silverdale. Why my farm?" He set down his hammer and looked at her directly. "Maybe I like the company." The simple statement caught her off guard. "I'm hardly good company, Mr. Xanders. I barely speak to you." "Some people say plenty without speaking much at all." His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "And I thought we'd agreed you'd call me Wade." A silence stretched between them, filled with something Vivian couldn't quite name. "I should get back to my baking," she said abruptly, turning toward the house. "Vivian," he called after her the first time he'd used her given name. She paused but didn't turn around. "I'll be finished here soon." "Would it be an imposition if I stayed for supper?" "I brought some fresh venison." She should refuse. Proper widows didn't entertain single men for dinner, but the prospect of company, his company, was surprisingly appealing. "I suppose that would be acceptable," she said, still not looking back. "As payment for your work." That evening marked a shift in their relationship. Over a simple meal of venison stew and cornbread, Vivian found herself talking more than she had in years. Wade told her about growing up in Virginia, fighting for the Confederacy despite his personal misgivings about slavery, and his years of wandering afterward, unable to return to a home that no longer existed. "The war took everything," he said quietly. "My family, our land, my youth." "War has a way of doing that," Vivian replied, thinking of her own losses. Wade studied her across the table. "How did your husband die, if you don't mind my asking?" "Influenza, 2 winters ago." She twisted her wedding ring still firmly in place. "It was quick, perhaps a mercy." "I'm sorry." His sympathy felt genuine, not like the hollow condolences of townsfolk who had never truly known Daniel. "We were childhood sweethearts," Vivian found herself saying. "Married at 16, I never imagined life without him. And yet here you are, carrying on. What choice did I have?" Wade nodded thoughtfully. "There's always a choice. You could have sold the farm, moved back east to family. This land was Daniel's dream, and now it's all I have left of him." She looked around the small kitchen, feeling the weight of memories. "Though I'm not sure how much longer I can hold on to it. The bank's been patient, but patience runs out eventually." "How much do you owe?" Vivian shook her head. "That's not your concern, Mr. Xanders." "Wade," he corrected gently, "and I'd like to help if I could. I don't need charity." "Yes, you've made that clear." His smile was warm, not mocking. "But there are other ways of helping. Your north field lies fallow. With the right help you could plant winter wheat, have a crop to sell by spring." The suggestion wasn't unreasonable. The field had been too much for her to manage alone after the last harvest hand she'd hired had left without notice. "And who would help me plant this miraculous crop?" The good Lord himself, Wade chuckled. I was thinking more along the lines of me and a couple of the boys from Triple Bar. The boss owes me a favor. And what would you want in return? A share of the profits, say 20%. It was a fair offer, more than fair, and they both knew it. Vivian studied him, trying to discern his true motives. Why would you do this? You barely know me. Wade's expression grew serious. Maybe I'd like to know you better. The words hung in the air between them, laden with possibility. Vivian felt a flush rise to her cheeks and looked down at her plate. I'll consider it, she said finally. After that evening, Wade became a regular presence at the Nelson farm. True to his word, he brought 2 other ranch hands to help prepare the north field for planting. The work was hard, but for the first time in 2 years, Vivian felt a spark of hope for the future. As autumn descended on Montana, painting the hills with gold and crimson, Vivian found herself watching for Wade's arrival each day. She began baking extra bread when she knew he would visit, took more care with her appearance, and even unpacked some of her prettier dresses from the trunk where she'd stored them after Daniel's death. The townsfolk noticed the change in her. On her monthly trip to Silverdale, Mrs. Hodgkins at the general store raised a knowing eyebrow. Heard Wade Xanders has been spending a lot of time out at your place, she remarked, measuring out flour. He's helping with the winter wheat, Vivian replied evenly. That what they're calling it these days. The older woman's tone was teasing but not unkind. He's a good man from what I hear, keeps to himself mostly, works hard, could do worse. It's not like that, Vivian insisted, though a small voice inside her whispered that perhaps she wished it were. That evening, as she and Wade sat on her porch watching the sunset after a day of work, she found herself studying his profile, the strong jaw, the slight cleft in his chin, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. People in town are talking, she said suddenly. Wade turned to look at her. About us, apparently so. He was quiet for a moment. Does that bother you? It should. Vivian twisted her wedding ring again, a nervous habit. I'm still in mourning by all proper standards. 2 years is a long time to mourn, Vivian. Not when you've lost half your soul. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Wade nodded slowly. I understand that, but Daniel wouldn't want you to stop living. No one who truly loves another would want that. A lump formed in Vivian's throat. How would you know what Daniel would want? Because I've known loss too, his voice was gentle. And if I loved someone, I'd want them to find happiness again, even if it wasn't with me. Tears welled in Vivian's eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. It feels like betrayal, she whispered. Wade reached over hesitantly and covered her hand with his. His touch was warm, solid, real. It's not betrayal to keep living, Vivian. It's courage. They sat in silence as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. Wade's hand remained on hers and Vivian didn't pull away. The winter wheat was planted before the first frost, the field a promise of renewal beneath the snow that soon blanketed the land. Wade still came by, though less frequently, as the Triple Bar needed all hands to prepare for the harsh Montana winter. On Christmas Eve, a blizzard howled across the plains. Vivian sat alone by her fireplace, a small pine branch decorated with paper ornaments, her only concession to the holiday. Daniel had always loved Christmas, filling the house with greenery and insisting on gifts even when money was tight. Without him, the day felt hollow. A pounding at the door startled her from her melancholy. She opened it to find Wade, snow-covered and stamping his boots. "What on earth are you doing here?" she exclaimed, pulling him inside. "It's treacherous out there." "Couldn't let you spend Christmas Eve alone," he said, unwrapping a scarf from his face. His cheeks were red with cold, but his eyes were bright. "Brought you something." From his coat, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Vivian stared at it, then at him. "You shouldn't have." "Probably not," he agreed with a smile, "but I wanted to." Hesitantly, she accepted the gift and unwrapped it. Inside was a delicate silver hairpin with a small pearl at the end, simple but beautiful. "It was my mother's," Wade said quietly. One of the few things I saved before our home was burned. Vivian touched the pearl gently. Wade, I can't accept this. It's too precious. So are you. He took a step closer. Vivian, I know you're still healing. I know Daniel still holds your heart. But if you could find room for me too, I'd be the happiest man in Montana territory. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. I don't know if I can, she whispered. I'm not asking for everything right now, just a chance. His hand came up to touch her cheek, feather light. May I call on you properly? No more pretending I'm just here to fix things or help with the farm. Vivian closed her eyes briefly, leaning slightly into his touch. Yes, she breathed. His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. That's the best Christmas gift I could ask for. The blizzard stranded Wade at her farm for 2 days, though he slept in the barn out of propriety. They talked for hours, played checkers, and read aloud from Vivian's small collection of books. By the time the snow stopped and the roads cleared enough for Wade to return to the triple bar, something fundamental had shifted between them. Through the rest of that winter, Wade courted Vivian with a patience and gentleness that gradually melted the ice around her heart. He brought her small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, a book of poetry, early spring flowers forced in the ranch greenhouse. They shared meals, stories, and increasingly, their hopes for the future. As March winds gave way to April showers, the winter wheat began to sprout tiny green promises pushing through the soil. Vivian stood at the edge of the field one evening, marveling at the transformation. It's beautiful, isn't it? Wade said, coming to stand beside her. Like a miracle, she agreed. Life always finds a way to begin again. He took her hand in his, a gesture that had become familiar and comforting. Vivian, there's something I need to tell you. She turned to him, suddenly anxious at his serious tone. What is it? I've been offered a position managing a ranch near Helena. Good pay, my own cabin. Vivian felt her heart sink. That's wonderful. When do you leave? That depends on you. Wade turned to face her fully. I won't take it if you ask me to stay. I can't ask that of you. It's a good opportunity. Better than what I have here. What do you have here? She asked softly. Wade's eyes held hers. You, if you'll have me. The words she'd been holding back for months finally escaped. I'm afraid, Wade, what if I can't love you the way you deserve? What if I'm too broken? We're all broken in some way, he said gently. The beauty is in how we piece ourselves back together. He touched the wedding ring she still wore. I'm not asking you to forget Daniel. He'll always be part of who you are, part of what I love about you. Vivian's breath caught. You love me, with everything I am. Wade knelt before her, right there at the edge of the promising field. Vivian Nelson, I love your strength, your stubbornness, your quiet courage. I love how you hold onto what matters and fight for it. I want to build a life with you, right here on this land that means so much to you. Tears streamed down Vivian's face. No one could possibly want me now. I'm a widow with a failing farm and too many memories. Wade rose and took her face in his hands. I do, he said firmly. I want you, memories and all. I want to make new memories with you if you'll let me. For a long moment, Vivian stood paralyzed by fear and hope. Then, slowly, she removed her wedding ring and placed it in her pocket. It would always be treasured, but it was time to make room for a new chapter. Yes, she whispered, and then louder. Yes, Wade Xanders, I will marry you. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that awakened something in Vivian she had thought long dead. When they finally parted, both breathless, she laughed a sound of pure joy that surprised even her. They were married in May, with the winter wheat tall and green around them. The ceremony was small, just the preacher, a few friends from town, and Wade's colleagues from the triple bar. Vivian wore a simple cream-colored dress and the pearl hairpin Wade had given her at Christmas. Wade wore his best shirt and a new vest, his face shining with happiness. That night, as they stood on the porch of what was now their home, Wade wrapped his arms around Vivian from behind, both of them looking out at the land that had once seemed like such a burden and now felt like a blessing. Are you happy, Mrs. Xanders? he murmured against her hair. Vivian leaned back into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him, the security of being truly loved again. Happier than I ever thought possible. You know, Wade said thoughtfully, this land could support more than just wheat. With a bit of work, we could add cattle, maybe some horses. Building a real ranch, why not? Between your knowledge of this land and my experience, we could make something special here. Vivian turned in his arms to face him. I like the sound of that, a true partnership. That's what marriage should be. Wade kissed her softly. Partners in everything. Over the next year, they transformed the struggling farm into the beginnings of a prosperous ranch. The winter wheat harvest brought enough money to pay off the bank and purchase a small herd of cattle. Wade's skill with horses attracted buyers from as far away as Butt. Vivian, who had once been so certain her life was over, found herself planning for a future she had never imagined. When she discovered she was expecting their first child, the joy she felt was tinged with bittersweet memories. One evening, as she and Wade sat by the fireplace, she confessed her mixed emotions. I feel guilty sometimes, being this happy when Daniel is gone. Wade considered her words carefully. Loving me doesn't diminish what you had with him. Love isn't finite, Vivian. It grows to fill the space we give it. She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. Our child will never know Daniel. But they'll know about him, Wade said firmly. We'll make sure of that. They'll know the man who loved their mother first, who built this place with his own hands. That's how we honor those we've lost, by remembering them, by telling their stories. Tears filled Vivian's eyes. How did I find someone who understands so perfectly? Wade smiled. Maybe Daniel sent me to you. I'd like to think that somewhere he knows you're taken care of, that you're loved. I do love you, Wade Xanders. She said it with all the certainty she possessed, with my whole heart. And I love you, Vivian Xanders, with everything I am and will ever be. Their daughter was born the following spring. A strong, healthy girl they named Elizabeth Daniel Xanders, a name that honored both their pasts while celebrating their shared future. As Vivian watched Wade cradle their infant daughter with such tenderness, she felt a completeness she had once thought impossible. Life in the West remained challenging. There were droughts and blizzards, threats from rustlers, and the ongoing struggle of carving civilization from wilderness. But through it all, Vivian and Wade faced each challenge together, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they stood once again at the edge of the North Field, now part of a thriving ranch with 3 times the original acreage, a reputation for quality horses, and a growing herd of cattle. Did you ever imagine this? Wade asked, his arm around her waist. Their son James, not quite 2, rode on his shoulders while Elizabeth played nearby with her doll. Vivian shook her head. Never. After Daniel died, I thought my life was over. I was just existing, not living. And now, she smiled up at him, her heart full. Now I know that life can surprise you, that even in our darkest moments, hope finds a way. Wade leaned down to kiss her, a gesture that still sent warmth spreading through her. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Vivian Xanders, only because I have you beside me. Always, he promised, for all the days we have left. As the sun set over their land, painting the Montana sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Vivian thought of the day Wade had first stopped to offer her a ride. How close she had come to refusing, to remaining trapped in her grief and loneliness. How different her life would have been. Thank you, she whispered, partly to Wade and partly to whatever fate or providence had brought him into her life. For what? He asked, curious. For seeing me when I was invisible. For wanting me when I thought no one could. Wade's eyes, still as blue as the summer sky after all these years, held the same warmth they had when he'd first told her he loved her. I'll always want you, Vivian, every day more than the day before. And as their children laughed and played around them, as the ranch they'd built together thrived under their care, Vivian knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just a second chance at love, but a love that would sustain her for all the days of her life. A love born in the wild Montana territory, where a widowed woman had whispered her deepest fear, and a cowboy had answered with the promise of forever.